Hello there everyone, my name is David Luchford and welcome to lesson 19 of my Ancient Greek course. Lesson 19 is on the second declension. In lesson 17 we met the first declension where we learned the two meanings of the term declension. And when we speak of the first, second and third declension, the term declension there means a group of nouns that change their endings in a similar way. So the second declension is the second group of nouns that change their endings in a similar way. And we also learned in lesson 17 that each of these three declensions is comprised of subgroups. And we learned that nouns within a subgroup of a declension change their endings in exactly the same way. And in lesson 17, we learned that there are four subgroups in the first declension. We learned that there are 1A nouns, 1B nouns, 1C nouns, and 1D nouns. Well, I'm pleased to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that in the second declension, there are just two subgroups. So there is less learning to do for the second declension than there was for the first declension. But before we look at the two subgroups of the second declension, I have a quick announcement for you. And that is that I now have a virtual set of shelves that I'm now going to be displaying at the start of each of my lessons. And I want to tell you that you can help me to fill this set of shelves if you wish to financially support the channel. Because if you go to www.buymeacoffee.com/learn ancient Greek, the link is in the description below and also in the info box in the corner of the video, then you will see that you can buy me a virtual amphora. Instead of buying me a coffee or coffees to support the channel, you can buy me an amphora, which is much more appropriate, given that an amphora is a two-handled ancient Greek storage jar. And as you can see in this blue button, a virtual amphora is just £3, which is currently equivalent at the time of making this video to $3.89 or €3.57. And you can of course pay in your own currency on the website. It's automatically converted. If you go to that page, you can choose how many amphorae you wish to buy. Then you just write your name or username. Now please note that that name or username will be displayed on the virtual shelf above your amphora. So make sure it's something you want other people to see. Nothing inappropriate, please. And then you just write a message featuring any emojis you wish and also any customization requests for your amphora. I'm no artist, but if you do have a request, like give my amphora a red glow, then I shall try to fulfill that request before adding your virtual amphora to my virtual shelf. After you've written your message, you just click support, put in your email and pay. And then, in my next lesson, you and all of my other viewers will see your amphora on this virtual set of shelves at the start of the video. That's on the assumption that I've had enough time to add it to one of the shelves before the lesson. So for example, if you buy an amphora on Friday, I probably won't have time to add it to the shelf so that it's there in the lesson that's released on Saturday, because I film and edit these lessons in advance. If that were to happen, it would appear on one of the shelves in the lesson following that one. Anyway, once your virtual amphora is added to one of these virtual shelves, it will be there for good. And my shelves featuring your amphora will be displayed at the start of every lesson. And I should say that I do only have 4 shelves here. So what I'm saying is on the assumption that there is space left on one of these shelves. If I ever do run out of space, then I shall need to find somewhere else to put the amphorae. And finally, if you wish to support the channel without adding an amphora to the virtual set of shelves, then you can do so. Just click to make your message private and say in your message that you do not want the virtual amphora to be added to the virtual set of shelves. I'm very grateful for all of your support and I would love to have an amphora or two on my shelves because these virtual shelves are looking pretty empty right now, unfortunately. But anyway, let's get back to the second declension and let's talk about the two subgroups of the second declension. And the second declension subgroups are 2A nouns and 2B nouns. As I said in lesson 17, I've taken these labels from Jack's Reading Greek course, as that is the course that I primarily used to learn Greek, and I found these labels to be invaluable in my understanding of Greek. Anyway, the second declension is comprised of two subgroups, 2A nouns and 2B nouns. And as I said before, to know which subgroup of a declension a noun belongs to, we need to know its nominative singular ending and its genitive singular ending. Now, with regard to these two subgroups in particular, we know that a noun is a 2A noun if its nominative singular ends in os and its genitive singular ends in ou. And we know that a noun is a 2B noun if its nominative singular ends in on and its genitive singular ends in ou. So this is our key for determining whether a noun is a second declension noun, and if so, which subgroup of the second declension it belongs to. Now in just a moment, we shall look at each of these subgroups in more depth, and we'll look at how nouns in each of those subgroups change their endings. But before that, I have a bit of useful information for you about the gender or genders of nouns in these subgroups. To begin with 2A nouns, most 2A nouns are masculine, but some are feminine, and a few are capable of being either masculine or feminine. And when I say that a few of them are capable of being either masculine or feminine, I don't mean at the same time in a text, but rather, in some cases they're masculine and in some cases they're feminine. And when I say in some cases, I mean in some instances. I don't mean in some grammatical cases. They have a masculine use and a feminine use. When you see one of these nouns that's capable of being either used in a text, it will either be masculine or feminine in that instance. It won't be both. 2B nouns are even more straightforward because all 2B nouns are neuter. And what I've just told you about the gender of nouns in each of these subgroups means that when you look up a 2A noun in a dictionary, you can expect it to either have the definite article ho, the definite article her, or alternatively, if it's one of those few that's capable of being masculine or feminine, then you might see ho/her in the dictionary entry. And when you find a 2B noun in the dictionary, it will have the definite article to in the entry, because all 2B nouns are neuter. So to illustrate how we would recognise that a noun is a 2A noun in a dictionary or word list, let's look at this example here. Here we've got doulos, ho, and then we've got the meaning slave. Now, as I said before, in a dictionary or word list, you're given three Greek forms. The first is the nominative singular form, the second is the genitive singular ending, or sometimes the full genitive singular form, and the third is the nominative singular form of the definite article that goes with that noun. And that third form lets you know the gender. But it's the first two forms which let us know which subgroup of a declension a noun belongs to. At least for first and second declension nouns. But please note that some third declension nouns do require you to look at their gender as well in order to determine which subgroup of the third declension they belong to. But we can work out the subgroup of first and second declension nouns just by looking at the nominative singular ending and the genitive singular ending. So if we look at doulos here, it ends in os in the nominative singular and ou in the genitive singular, and therefore it is a 2A noun. And you can see that this particular 2A noun is masculine, since we've got the masculine nominative singular definite article with it. And now most 2A nouns, as I said, are masculine, but some are feminine, and a few are capable of being either masculine or feminine. But the important point to note here is because it ends in os in the nominative singular and ou in the genitive singular, it is a 2A noun. So this is how we would recognise a 2A noun from a dictionary or a word list. Doulos is a 2A noun. But here we have the noun ploion, and we're given ploion, ou, to, and the meaning ship. And you can see that the nominative singular ends in on, and the genitive singular ends in u. Because the nominative singular ends in on and the genitive singular ends in u, this must be a to be noun. And we can see from the definite article that this noun is neuter and all to be nouns are neuter. Okay, so that just confirms what we already know. Let's now look at each of these subgroups in more depth, including how they change their endings. And let's start by talking about 2a nouns. As I've already said, 2a nouns are mostly masculine, but some are feminine, and a few are capable of being either masculine or feminine. Let's look at some examples now. Here we have the noun doulos, which we saw in the example of a dictionary entry of a 2a noun a moment ago. We can see it's a 2a noun from the nominative singular ending os and the genitive singular ending u, and from the definite article ho, we can see that it's masculine. A second example of a 2a noun is the noun Nersos, which means island. We can see that it ends in os in the nominative singular and u in the genitive singular, and so it must be a 2a noun. However, here we see the definite article her, and so this is a feminine noun. So Nersos would change its endings just like all other 2a nouns, but it's feminine in gender. And that makes a difference when it comes to adjectives, which we shall look at in the future, because many adjectives would use a different set of endings when they're applying to a feminine noun. So it is important to know the gender of each noun. And now, because 2a nouns can be either masculine, feminine, or capable of being either, we do need to learn the gender of each 2a noun. Whereas with 2b nouns, we know that they're all neuter, so we don't have to learn the gender of each 2b noun individually. A third example of a 2a noun is the noun anthropos. We can see that it's a 2a noun because it ends in os in the nominative singular and u in the genitive singular. Now you have met this noun previously in my course, and I told you that it means man in the sense of human. Like how we say mankind and we mean humankind, anthropos means man in the sense of human or person. However, what I neglected to tell you then is that this noun is capable of being either masculine or feminine. Previously, I told you that it's a masculine noun, and it is usually masculine, but it can be feminine. That is to say, it has a masculine use and a feminine use. And when it appears as a masculine noun, it means man or person or human. But when it appears as a feminine noun, it means woman. So, ho anthropos would mean the man or the person, but her anthropos would mean the woman. So if you see it with a feminine form of the definite article, then you know that in that instance it's feminine, meaning woman. When it's feminine, it can also mean slave woman in a derogatory sense. But for now, I'm just giving the meaning woman when it's feminine, okay? So if you see it as a feminine noun, then translate it as woman. But if it's masculine, translate it as man or person. And this third noun illustrates the principle that a few 2a nouns are capable of being either masculine or feminine. And we can see that from the fact that it has ho/her as the definite article. So you'll see it with ho/her in a word list or a dictionary, or alternatively m/f if they're giving you mfn rather than ho, her or to. But anyway, let's now talk about how 2a nouns change their endings. And let's do that by looking at the declension of doulos. Remember that this is declension in the other sense of the word, namely a list of a noun's different forms according to the cases that it might be in. So doulos is going to be our paradigm for all 2a nouns, okay? Because all 2a nouns will change their endings just like doulos does here. And let's look at the different forms of doulos. Let's look at how it changes its endings. It declines as follows: doulos, doulon, doulou, douloi, dule, duloi, dulus, dulon, dulois. Now before I say anything else, notice that we do have a special vocative form here. Remember that the vocative is the calling case. It's the case used to address somebody. So if you wanted to call your slave, you would say dule. Or if you wanted to say thank you, slave, you would say thank you, dule, with this ending e. So we do have a special vocative form in the singular for this noun. But remember, if I don't give a separate vocative form, then it will be identical to the nominative form. So in the plural, for instance, if you were addressing a group of slaves, it would still be duloi. It's not any different to the nominative plural form. But anyway, we have 9 endings to learn here. Os, on, u, oi, oi, us, on, ois. And you might think, how can I learn these endings? Well, once again, I have good news for you. Namely, if you've learned the forms of the definite article, which you should have done if you're following this course, then you will notice a great similarity between the endings of 2a nouns and the masculine forms of the definite article. We said that doulos uses the endings os, on, u, oi, and e in the vocative, and then oi, us, on, ois. The masculine forms of the definite article are ho, ton, tu, toi, there is no vocative, and then hoi, tus, ton, tois. Can you spot the similarity there? To make this apparent, let me say that the endings of 2a nouns, like doulos, are the same as the masculine forms of the definite article, but minus the rough breathings. You need to add sigma to the first form to make it os rather than just o, and then get rid of the tau throughout. If you do that, then you find that you have the endings of 2a nouns with the exception of the vocative singular, which is a form you'll have to learn individually. But if we forget about the vocative singular form for a moment, you will see that we've now got, over in these definite article tables, os, on, u, oi, oi, us, on, ois. And the endings, ignoring the vocative singular, of 2a nouns are os, on, u, oi, oi, us, on, ois. So overall, the endings of 2a nouns are very easy to learn because they're the same as the masculine forms of the definite article, except in 4 respects. Number 1, the endings don't involve any h sound, so we need to get rid of the rough breathings from the masculine nominative forms of the definite article. Number 2, we need to add sigma to the masculine nominative singular form of the definite article to make it os rather than just o. Number 3, we need to get rid of tau from all of the other forms so that we've got on, u, oi rather than ton, tu, toi. And fourthly and finally, we need to remember that there is this additional vocative singular ending that 2a nouns have, which isn't present in the forms of the definite article. So we need to remember that epsilon on its own is the vocative singular ending for 2a nouns. I hope that helps you learn the endings of 2a nouns. And remember, you can learn how nouns in each subgroup change their endings by memorizing a declension of a paradigmatic noun, like doulos on the screen now, or by memorizing the endings alone, or by doing both of these things, okay? In any case, I shall leave the declension of doulos on the screen now for you to note down the declension or just the endings or both. So please pause the video and do one of those things. Let's now talk about the second and only other subgroup in the second declension, namely 2b nouns. As I've already said, 2b nouns are all neuter. And an example of a 2b noun, which we've already seen, is the noun ployon. We can see it's a to be noun because it ends in on in the nominative singular and ou in the genitive singular. And we can see that it's neuter from the definite article to. But we know that all to be nouns are neuter. So it must be a neuter noun. And let's use this noun, ployon, as our paradigm to see how to be nouns change their endings. Here is the declension of ployon. We can see that we've got no separate vocative form for ployon in either the singular or the plural. So there is no vocative form that's distinct from the nominative. The vocative singular will be visually identical to the nominative singular, and the vocative plural will be visually identical to the nominative plural. It may be useful to note that throughout Greek, the vocative plural will always be identical to the nominative plural. But some nouns in Greek, like to-a nouns for example, have a unique vocative singular form that does differ from the nominative singular. But to-be nouns are not among those. To-be nouns have a vocative singular that looks just like the nominative singular. So we've just got 8 forms to look at here. So let's now go through how ployon declines. It goes ployon, ployon, ployou, ployoi, ploya, ploya, ployon, ployois. So the endings are on, ou, oi, on, ois. Now the first thing to say, right off the bat, is something that I have mentioned in a previous video, namely that in ancient Greek, neuter words are visually identical in the nominative and the accusative. So the accusative form of a neuter noun will always be the same as the nominative form. So we can see that the nominative singular form of ployon is ployon, and the accusative singular form of ployon is ployon. The nominative plural form of ployon is ploya, and the accusative plural form of ployon is ploya. So you can see that the accusative is visually identical to the nominative. And that applies to all neuter words in Greek. If a word is neuter, whether that word is a noun or an adjective, the accusative form will be visually identical to the nominative form in the same number. And you would have to tell whether a neuter noun is nominative or accusative from the context. But the fact that the nominative and the accusative are visually identical with neuter words is helpful when it comes to learning the declension of these words, because there is less learning to do. There are fewer new forms to learn. And I have some other good news for you concerning how to learn the endings of to-be nouns. And that is that the endings of to-be nouns are the same as those of to-a nouns, except in 4 places. And we can see this by putting the declension of doulos, a to-a noun, next to the declension of ployon, a to-be noun. The 4 places where the endings differ are as follows. Firstly, in the nominative singular, because to-be nouns have on, but to-a nouns have os. Secondly, in the vocative singular, because to-be nouns have a vocative singular that's identical to their nominative singular, whereas to-a nouns have a vocative singular that ends in e, epsilon, that is. The third place where they differ is in the nominative plural, because to-be nouns end in a here, whereas to-a nouns end in oi. And the fourth and final place is in the accusative plural, because to-be nouns end in a here, once again, whereas to-a nouns end in us. So those are the 4 places where their endings differ, but they have the same endings everywhere else. If we have a look to confirm this, the accusative singular of to-be nouns ends in on, and the accusative singular of to-a nouns ends in on. The genitive singular here ends in u, the genitive singular there ends in u. The dative singular here ends in oi, the dative singular there ends in oi. The genitive plural here ends in orn. The genitive plural there ends in orn. The dative plural here ends in ois, and the dative plural there ends in ois. So I hope that's a useful tip for learning how to be nouns change their endings. And one final useful tip is that you can remember the nominative and accusative plural endings a, because the neuter forms of the definite article in the nominative and accusative plural are ta. So drawing that comparison may be helpful. Anyway, please do make sure that you've noted down either the forms of ploion on the screen or just the endings of ploion or both. And that brings us to the end of this lesson. So let's summarise our learning for lesson 19. We have learned that the second declension is composed of two subgroups, 2A nouns and 2B nouns. We learned how to recognise that a noun belongs to one of these subgroups. So we know that 2A nouns end in os in the nominative singular and u in the genitive singular, and 2B nouns end in on in the nominative singular and u in the genitive singular. And we also learned the genders of nouns in these subgroups. So we learned that 2A nouns are mostly masculine, but some are feminine, and a few are capable of being either masculine or feminine. And we also learned that 2B nouns are all neuter. And finally, we learned how nouns in these subgroups change their endings. We learned how 2A nouns change their endings by looking at the declension of the noun doulos, and we learned how 2B nouns change their endings by looking at the declension of the noun ploion. But for now, I want to say thank you very much for watching the video, and thank you for all of your support. Your comments are incredibly encouraging. And as a reminder, if you wish to support me financially, then you can go to www.buymeacoffee.com/learn ancient Greek, where you can buy me a virtual amphora, which I shall then add to my virtual set of shelves. And finally, please do tune in to the next video, which is going to be on second declension practice exercises, so that you can put your knowledge of the second declension to the test. But for now, I must say, goodbye, and I shall see you again next time.